Yours is there, Mike. I assume somebody put that there.
Oh, did we already take one? No, I have taken
Not telling people about the sewer.
Oh, okay.
overloaded one person.
Especially those who live in Quincy or. Yeah.
I used it 5 times.
That's 100.
Where did it be?
Is this yours? Did you leave it when you signed in? There's one up at the sign in. I have them. I need to take them up.
Whatever the size of it, they don't stop it.
Oh yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Wonderful.
First I couldn't find them. Have them.
This one's upside
Yeah. And I was
down.
gonna type them up on the plane.
She'll be down eventually for lunch. She knows you need lunch.
Welcome everybody to the February 28th, last day of February 2018 meeting of the Abington Finance Committee. We are continuing our series of department head meetings. We have the DPW with us tonight and South Shore VOTEC. And we will have some other discussions at the end of that, go over the latest copy of the budget that has been provided to us, both summary and line by line. If anyone has any questions on the new version. But let's start right out with DPW.
Okay.
Mr. Stone, how are you tonight?
Good, how you doing? You want to start with highway salaries? Is that what you want to start? I just want to make sure we're all on the same.
Where would you like to start?
Wherever you guys are. Page 92.
Apparently we are going to start with a question from Ms. Red.
Go ahead.
Because I was just wondering where we're at with the snow budget.
Snow budget is,
That is a good
Like
question.
All right.
the current.
yeah, that's $235,000 approximately.
Okay.
Could be like
Yeah.
$100.
I won't hold you to it. I just wanted to know around where we were.
And so far this year, we've had 39.4 snow. I know people think we don't have much snow, but we did have a few. 39.3, and the yearly average is 44, so we're right there. So pretty much average. I think by the time it's over, it will be at average.
Right at the-
No, it's okay, it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
It's over.
What page are we for?
32.
Thank you.
So highway salaries.
Highway salaries, not many changes other than contractual obligations and a slight increase in overtime, I believe. Actually, overtime stayed the same.
So I could stay the same.
Yeah, overtime stayed the same. So really, I mean, other than the COLAs, it's pretty much the same. I mean, I can go through every position if you'd like.
Do we want to go through each position?
What do you guys, if I remember?
We're good. I see no appetite for that as of right now, so.
All right, move on to electricity.
How many positions is it? Just,
Good question.
See, we
sorry.
have DPW is a total of 12, I'll call it field staff. That doesn't include office staff. That includes myself, and the assistants of the highway, the sewer, the foreman, and the highway guys and the sewer guys. It's a total of 12 of us. And then the office staff is 2 full-time and 2 part-time.
All positions full?
Yes, we just filled the last office part-time position this year. So with those 14 people, 16 people, excuse me, pretty much everything. Those people deserve a ton of credit for all of them. They're unbelievable.
What's the average size of a DPW?
Probably,
Where do we stand compared to other towns our size?
probably 60%. Probably 40% understaffed compared to other towns. I didn't actually look into it too much, but I know we're way under other towns. But we get it done, you know?
Absolutely.
All credit to all the staff.
Mm.
So electricity, this first line item is electricity. That's just for power for the buildings and garages at the highway barn. Really no change there. You guys on the same page as me?
Yep.
Okay. Electricity for street lights, we had to bump that up because we were short every year due to the rising cost of electricity. So we bumped that up. That way we didn't have to move monies around or ask for money at the end of the year.
Do we still have, some people pay for their own streetlight?
Yes, years
You
ago.
just explain that, because we,
Yeah,
like a lot of
years
new
ago, the
people.
town, I think most towns did it, blacked out certain lights, street lights, because it was running $500,000 a year. So they left the ones on their corners, their pedestrian crosswalks, and their street lights, and their traffic lights, and the others they shut up. But residents they can turn them on themselves and pay for them themselves monthly. So that's where we stand with that. But the electricity costs are rising, I'm sure you all know. That's why we had to bump that up.
Sometimes I hear people say, I know that so-and-so has a streetlight in front of their house, and the street.
Probably on a corner.
Well, that's not on it, and it's, I think
it's not paid for.
this oftentimes it's because the resident's paying for it.
That's right.
Is it a plan to get rid of the lights, or is it a plan to keep them, just not use them? Is it
Keep
a
'em,
plan
just
to,
not
like,
use
maybe
'em.
bring them to solar?
To keep them, just not use them right now.
Yep.
One of the long plans of the next couple of years, kind of unrelated to the presentation, is to perhaps the town purchase the streetlights and convert them to LEDs in the
Yep.
next couple of years. That would probably save a lot of money over the current streetlight bill, but that's not what we're talking about tonight.
Yep,
That's
got
just
it.
in terms of longer term
Yep.
savings. One of the, many years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, there were a lot of grants available to do that to the state. That hasn't been a program available, so a lot of towns we didn't take advantage of back at that time, haven't done it in quite some time. So that's something we're talking to Andrew about right now, but probably maybe a year or two before that, something that might come to fruition.
Okay.
There are 800 of them, so that's part of, that's part of the problem. Yeah, 800. Close to 800, anyway, it might be 790. Let's see, so the street light, we talked about the street lights. Building repair and maintenance, that's no change. That's basic repair and maintenance to the highway building. Vehicle repair and maintenance, no change. Just that line item is used to fund basic repairs of the fleet. Traffic light, electricity repair, no change. Oftentimes, the traffic light will go out. It's something we can't handle. We have to call on a contractor to take care of it. So that happens once in a while. But we didn't increase that line item number.
Previous years, have we gone up to that amount, over, under?
I think
What's the average on that?
I'd say around 12. I mean, I'd say around 12. Let's see, where am I now? Outside contracts. We kept that the same, 15,000. Tree trimming.
Can you explain the outside contracts?
Sure. We pay for outside contracts, like we'll pay a contractor to come in and spray herbicide on the side of the road to kill the weeds. That's one example. We don't have equipment for that. Sometimes we have to replace guardrails. We'll call in a contractor to come in and replace guardrails. We fund stuff like that out of this line item here. So we kept it the same, 15,000. It's basically for stuff we can't do in-house. We like to think we can do almost everything in-house, but sometimes we have to go out.
Thank you.
No problem. That brings us to tree trimming. It's the same, 28,000. We're taking a more proactive approach now ever since that accident a couple of years ago. And we're taking on a lot of trees, but we still got calls. We're taking a much more proactive approach, and we're finally catching up on our list. Shortly after that happened, we had a list of 3 pages long, and now we're down to 1 page, and that'll allow us to take a more proactive approach.
What about the electric company, like National
will-
Grid, and they'll
come around and they'll prune trees around their wires. They won't, if they don't have to take down a tree, they're not gonna take down a tree. But they will prune them around wires, prune dangerous limbs around wires. And that's pretty much it.
I just know recently somebody was complaining about something that had been pruned and the stuff was left.
Oh,
I think
really?
it was.
By us?
No, I think it ended up being the, but they do that.
They definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we left at the same 28,000. Other property-related services, no change. That line.
Is that outside, or meaning like you guys hire people to trim, or you guys do it?
Oh, no, we contract that out. We went through a bidding process.
Yep.
We had a contractor. We don't have a bucket truck that can.
Yep.
Our bucket truck only goes up 25 feet. And most of the trees we're talking about 70 up to 120 feet tall. We just don't have the equipment. So it's easier to hire a contractor, come in one day, he can take down 8 trees.
And do you have like, so you know today, for 19, what trees you guys are gonna cut down?
Yes,
Yep.
I have a list on my desk. That list was 3 pages long not too long ago. Now it's down to 1, thank God. But we'll make progress, and then we'll just take a more proactive approach after that. Get rid of decaying trees, dead trees, things like that. Other property-related services, we use that line item to fund natural gas for the highway buildings. So we didn't change that. Tools, we increased that a bit. Kind of want to stop buying our own tools. So that's why we increased that.
Excuse me, Matt. This is just for John. Can we just go back to the other property-related service budget?
Sure.
My eyes might be screwy, but it says
Yeah,
21,195.
Yeah, that was,
31,95.
the town, when they took down the Boy Scout house near Labor Field.
Yes.
They just put the money that they had in that line item last year. They needed a place to put the money, so they put it in our line item of other property-related services.
No worry. The only reason why I was calling it out is it said it's level funded.
Yeah.
And it went from $29,000 down to $31,000.
Yeah,
It's
no, they,
stayed the same, so.
So it's fine. You answered it perfectly well. I just
Okay.
was more making sure I wasn't looking at a document that you weren't looking at.
No, it's a good question. But I looked at it earlier, I was like, what is this?
And that's already been used to.
Yeah, they raised the
to
building.
raise
Yeah,
the
that
building.
building is down,
Raised
so.
it. Yep. Needed it. I think anyway. Office supplies, 200, no change. See, fuel and gas, no change there. Yeah, no change. Vehicle supplies, that's in-house repairs, parts, tires, anything for the fleet vehicles.
Is that, because I know when each department comes in, they talk about how good a job you guys do
Oh, they do
working on their vehicles.
Yeah,
Is this only your own vehicles, or is this the whole town?
no, this is our own vehicles.
Okay.
If there's a police car that comes in, we give them the bill for tires or mufflers or whatever the case may be, but I
They
have
have
to.
their own vehicle maintenance.
Yes.
Each
I know,
department
I
usually
just
has a, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between 4 and this one, just so I know?
Between what?
Line item 4, or, I don't know, I guess it's. Here. Vehicle repair and maintenance budget, and then whatever the vehicle supplies budget.
So
Oh, it's just supplies for the
52
maintenance?
5242 is vehicle repair and maintenance. And then
Right.
5481 is vehicle supplies.
I think this is more for parts, different parts like mufflers, tires, things of that nature. That's what that one's for. But there was no change there.
That answer it, Greg?
Yeah, so it basically supplies, the other one is the actual maintenance, like
Yeah.
the labor.
Exactly.
Yep.
So you're paying yourself labor for working on your own vehicles?
No, we're not paying ourselves labor. Just double check that. We don't pay ourselves labor.
So it's 5242.
Let me just double check that real quick. Stopped. I'll have to get back to you. Is it all right?
Sorry, I don't mean
that's
that.
Absolutely,
This
yes.
one might be for outside. The first one might be for things we can't do inside. The second one is probably for vehicle parts inside. But if I could email that to you,
Yeah,
that's a
that
valid
would,
question.
no, that would be great.
I'm still kind of nervous.
This is the new system too, right? So it's new categories, new numbers?
New numbers and everything.
Thank you.
No problem. Let's see, tire and gravel. It's just for asphalt, for repairing potholes and things like that. Street signs and street striping.
Just to make a point for those that are paying attention, the state roads like 18139.
Yeah.
The state does those.
The state does those, we don't have anything.
It is not,
We get
if
called
there
all
are
the time.
potholes on those roads, it is not the Abington
No, it's not us.
DPW that is
It's not
taking
us.
care of those, so.
It's not us.
Is there any way that town people can get the state to take better care?
Probably by calling the state, or if they call us, we can call the state. Might be.
I don't think they're gonna do anything to 18 right now.
No, I don't think.
No, they're gonna tear it
Yeah.
apart.
I mean, it's a small.
No, I understand, but there
It's
was a
about time of
pothole
year.
at 18139 forever that
Sorry.
they didn't fill.
Yeah. Yeah, we called them that. I think they actually filled it at one point and they came back, which is common in this type of weather. So street signs and street striping, no change. That's for replacing faded street signs, crosswalk striping, and ice cream crosswalks we did.
Yep.
Those.
Yeah,
That's
that
everything.
look good.
Public work supplies, that's just for pipes, catch basins, manholes, just basic DPW supplies.
Where are we? Sorry. So,
Switch
The last
Did-
Is that-
Oh, did I go too fast?
What number was that one?
It was 5535. Was it Mark Street signs that went on?
Yeah.
They went on to materials and support budget appropriations.
Expense budget, 57.
it's just
No,
a
it's the
different,
expense. We're on page 33.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, no, you're good.
No,
They're not matching up here.
What number do you have?
I got
The one
5535.
Yeah.
Yep, so that was.
Materials and
Materials and
Public works
supplies.
Materials,
Okay.
supplies. Yeah, they
Yep.
keep changing the name.
Saw what looked like malts in my
Yeah, it does look like names.
sheet.
I think it's just the system. I have to get used to the system is all.
Yep.
All right, and then expenses is no change. We use that for cones, safety equipment, like those anti-class 2 vests that, so you don't get run over, and things of that nature. Kept that the same.
Looks like that one's actually slightly down
it's down.
on FY18.
I don't know.
Not significantly, but
Yeah,
a little bit.
it's down a little bit.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on.
Yes.
This is actually for the town manager, but through Mr. Stone. Do we know what the appropriation, the actual spend rather, is for 8213, which is the electricity for streetlights? And the basis of the question is that's the only budget that went up by 25%. So not that we doubt that it's, may as well fund it appropriately, but what is the actual spend now? So we can see.
What did we spend last year?
No, what you put, right now, fiscal year 18 to date, we currently budgeted $100,000. You're asking for $125,000 for fiscal 19 with the assertion that to keep up with cost.
Yes.
So the question's gonna be, is great, we're 7 months into the fiscal year, or 8 months into the fiscal year as of tomorrow, so what is the actual spend as of right this physical second?
Good question. I don't have that info. with me right
I
now.
was headed to him. I figured I'd ask him, since he's the keeper of all the,
$77,804.
And that's valued as of today?
As of the 26th.
For all intents and purposes, good.
Yep.
Basically today.
If you need any further help, please.
You wait. Got it. So my esteemed colleague helped me with the quick math. It just implies you're on track for about 115 grand
Yeah.
versus about 25.
I will also say though, that we do expect, again, with our net metering contract, that just went into effect in the end of November. We should be saving about 11% on our electric bill, whatever the national grid, whatever the national grid rates will be. So we're still monitoring how effective that's going to be. And obviously, there's going to be impact positively by that.
So maybe the 125 is a little too high.
Perhaps.
Maybe
like
10,
I said,
12.
Keep in mind, this budget was submitted, a
Let's
couple months ago.
let me be. I'll be Nostradamus. I'll say within 2 weeks we're going to turn our clocks back, right? And I will suggest that there'll be more light, and I will equally suggest
Really
that
going out on a limb.
the spend on the electrical street lights, which is so minor for us to waste all this time on, for next year is going to come in under about 50. That's just my guess. So maybe we just keep that in the back of our heads that you have 10 grand.
Yep.
The question here. That's all. Thank you.
And on to snow. No change. Overall, it's $100,000. Obviously, we'll go over that. It's just what we do every year.
And as we discussed at the beginning, about, what did you say, 235 or so?
235,
Over-
yeah.
Over right now, so we're
235 over.
335 total this year.
335, yeah.
How many storms before you spent what you had?
We've been out 20
How many
times.
storms before you spent what we budgeted?
How many storms? I would say 8.
8 storms, but eight
We haven't
storms
had 8 storms this year, though.
That's-
Well,
Yes.
not significant, but 8
Yeah.
times that
Yeah.
they've had
If
to
there's
go out
something
with
they have to
and
go
ice
do
the,
something.
salt
That's
the
8
roads.
storms. You could go out 20 times in one storm, depending on the storm.
We've been out 20 different dates.
Yeah.
Snow, I have the list here, we have it certified, and we've been out, it snowed 16 times. And the other 4 times with the
Ice.
rain and the way it turned ice. But we have $100,000 budgeted for FY19, same as last year and the year before that.
And how much
Yep.
do you spend how much was it at the beginning of the season to fill the salt shed?
It's probably $40,000,
And how much did we put in your budget for snow?
100.
Just, yeah,
Well, salt, we budgeted 30,000, and you said you spent 40,000.
Yeah, we
So you
always,
exceeded your budget by $10,000 before you even started.
we have to, we have no choice.
You can see our
So can you
historical over expenditure averages about 400,000.
So you,
Each year.
can you just explain again? We just piss through our budget because we can. It's the only line
is
item
the
in our budget
only-
that we can
There are
max out on.
There are strange rules around the snow and ice removal budget in which it's the only area where you are legally allowed to exceed your budget, but it's also.
Is this what other towns
In
do?
Yes.
municipal,
It's
yeah.
also an area where
You can't predict it.
if you raise your budget up, you're required to keep your budget up. You can't change it year to year the way that you can with
So if
other
you-
budgets.
No, I'll defer to Greg and then I'll.
So if you go to 150, you have to stay at 150, everything. The only question I have, and this, again, I haven't done this a lot, but why don't we go there if we know we always exceed it? Is it only because we know that we can use that for other things, basically?
So,
All right.
Sure.
I think in equal measure, in the number of years you hear different administrations go through the deficit spending and the snow and ice, why lock yourself in to a number that you may or may not hit? Force majeure is force majeure. Second, it's going to be paid, right, on the cherry sheet, because you're going to get paid. They're going to get paid regardless when you come back and evaluate the free cash. The challenges that we had is Snowmageddon 2 years back. There was no way to predict, and we had a discussion suggesting that, well, geez, instead of being caught so far off guard, we should raise it up. And my point is, much like was articulated here, keep it low. Legitimately keep it low, John, you spent 40 grand for snow, for salt. You said it right. You spent 10 grand for salt and gravel, and you spent 30 grand for salt, for salt rather, for sand and gravel. So that part's fine. I think it's proper planning. You're gonna deal with it, and from a budgetary piece, Rick gets to say this is the budget priority, and I say one of the few times, unarguably, it makes a lot of sense.
No, I mean, they do an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
That I think
Appreciate
that
it.
the town,
And
you
I think I
know,
mentioned before, I've had residents who moved away complain about the new towns that they've moved into and say they're not as good as Abington, so.
although Weymouth might do a little bit better job if you're going up Thicket Street in a storm, but
I will-
they're a city.
I will say though that, you may have some information a little bit later tonight that may cause us to, that we heard about a week and a half ago, the whole South Shore Tech assessment news is very positive. And it may be worthwhile to think that we might be looking to add something to the structural deficit, not going up to our full amount that we historically overspent, but there is a structural gap we may want to start to think about, given what, again, that's for the next few weeks ahead.
So I think an interesting question would be, over, say, the last 10 or so years, what is the least we've spent on snow and
I
ice
think there was
removal?
one year we didn't get anything. We got nothing. It's like no snow. We might have got some, we had to salt the roads.
Salt the roads,
Yeah.
You
yeah.
know? But I think there was a year we really
So-
didn't get any, like, plowing events.
And we've had years too,
Yeah.
I know, where the price of salt has
Yeah.
been exorbitant.
Yep.
I don't know what it is right now, but I know that there have
Down.
been years that it was,
They couldn't get it.
right,
Yeah.
short supply, or,
Short supply.
yeah.
But I will say that the storm of February 18th, we got 5.6 inches, and we didn't on our contractors, every other town. So we saved a lot of money. I just want to point that out because
That's great.
The guys worked really hard.
Yes.
Every other abutting town called plowed. We didn't know. We sanded it all night, but we didn't call on the contractors, so we saved a lot of money on that.
John was on all night long.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
Deciding whether or not to call them in.
Yeah, we were.
And if I remember correctly, that was the one where it snowed, and by about 10 o'clock the next morning, it was
Gone.
gone.
Absolutely.
So.
That was that one.
So you need to shovel your driveway every time.
Yeah.
Any other questions there? It's definitely a very complicated area, budget, so. Anyone else?
Sorry, yes, so the expense, what is that, give some ideas of what,
Snow expense?
no, just, yeah, it just says at the
Yeah,
end there,
just
just the
shovels,
expense budget, shovels,
shovels.
bones, stuff like that.
Yeah, shovels, like, parts for the snow blowers, just parts for plows, things like that.
Sort of like miscellaneous stuff.
Miscellaneous stuff.
Yep.
Cutting edges. We on to page 37?
Yes.
Sewer salaries, we had a few changes. Contractual obligations increased it a little bit. We filled it-
36 or 37?
37.
Sewer. Waste
36.
collection is separate.
Board of
I don't know how
That's
that
Board
goes.
of Health.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Gotcha.
that waste collection is Board of Health,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
When I first saw this, I thought I was missing a page. But we, contractual obligations, and then we filled an open position in the office.
Was that a full-time or a part-time
That was
position?
part-time. And we moved some money from the part-time line item, as you can see here.
Yeah,
To the
to the
full-time
full-time.
line. Yeah. Do you want me to run down all the people, the positions? You guys good with that?
How many positions is that?
We got a superintendent, a field superintendent, foreman, and 2 licensed soil technicians out in the field. So it's 5 people. And then there's office staff.
Superintendent is,
Me.
the reason I ask is because when we go over 12 field staff,
That includes me.
right, but that includes, that
That's not-
5 is part of that
Absolutely.
number 12, that number
Absolutely.
12,
We are a total of 12.
right. It, for highway
Yeah, it
and
was- it was
sewer
Yep.
and
Park and
park and rec.
On February 16th, it was us 12 that were there all night long. We didn't call them the contractors. Most guys deserve a ton of credit for that.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Do you want to just move on to the line items now? It's, electricity, all right.
Overtime,
Wait.
because, just
Yeah,
because I always
overtime
find
went up.
that interesting, because
Yeah.
that's stuff you can't predict,
Yeah,
and,
in their contracts, the DPW contract, they had a minimum of call-out time of 3 hours. So if they got called in for something, it was a minimum, they got a minimum 3 hours, no matter what it was. In the new contract, that increased to 4 hours. So with that, I had increased, an estimate. I went from 24 to 30, it's just an estimate. Because I can't predict overtime,
Right.
emergencies, and dig saves, and all kinds of stuff, like pump station failures, I can't predict it. So I just bumped it up a little to where I thought it would
Trying to estimate what the contractual change will impact.
Yeah, how it will affect it. We had to bump that up $6,000, definitely.
can you just go over, like, the alarm goes off?
Yeah, we have 13 pump stations. We used to have 12, but now we have the school's pump station. They're all connected to all our phones. We all have phones. And they're all of them are monitored for high well, which means we have a serious problem. Low well, which means we have a minor problem, or power outage. We respond to power outages because a power failure can mess up the electronics inside the pump station. So we check it. So if we get called off for that, a guy has to go for that. Now he gets 4 hours for going on as opposed to 3. That's why you see that increase. So all our pump stations, our 13 pump stations are monitored for 3 different things. Well, actually 4 different things. And then, we'll get calls for emergency dig saves. If like if there's a gas leak, the sewer guys will go up and mark where the sewer line is so the gas company doesn't hit our sewer line, which happens. And that's a disaster. We don't want that. So,
And that's something that gets called out for like overtime? The
Yes, sir.
basic stuff?
yes, sir.
Is there, when people do have overtime, is it a possible thing where you actually have 4 hours of work to do for them?
Absolutely.
Or is it just like they get called out and it was only an hour worth of work and it is what it is?
Yeah, sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's over 4 hours.
Yep.
If it's over 4 hours, if they work 5, they only get 5.
No, meaning like, so say they go out for an hour, right? And I'm assuming you monitor that. Is there something else like in this
You
whole
make
thing that
them
you can
work for
have
4
them?
hours.
Is there always like, can you always give somebody 4 hours worth of work? Sorry, I should have asked it a different way.
That question, no, I understand what you're saying. No, that question has come up. I don't know if that, I don't know about the contract.
I'm guessing that's a
That would be
collectively
a-
bargained
Through the
issue. Collectively
bargaining.
bargained issue.
We thought about it. I definitely thought about it, give them something else to do while they were here. And give them 4 hours anyway.
Yep.
But it's a collective bargaining issue, I believe.
Okay.
Have you explored the collective bargaining issue?
What's that?
Have you explored the collective bargaining issue? We heard from one department head indicating that he lost in arbitration about that very same issue, but at least he went to the mat and tried it. The notion of 4-hour minimum, you work for 20 minutes, you get paid for 4. The attempt to assign 4 hours worth of work, and he had his own issue. The question would be is, have you explored that option with, and I ask
So
you,
if
if it's a
you
4 hour,
explain that to me again, please?
sure, 4-hour minimum. You know that part.
Yeah.
I work an hour, I get
Explain
paid
to
for
me
4.
about the
So
person.
you had a department head that had already tried under his collective bargaining agreement. He tried, he didn't have success. My question to you is, have you tried under your collective bargaining agreement to say, if you're gonna be called and you get 4 hours worth of work, we're gonna have you work for 4 hours?
It's a good question. It's something we have to look into definitely before we agree to a new contract and this one expires. Something I definitely want to look into. Because, not only did it increase in the sewer, it increased in the highway because they're the same union.
Yep.
Like the same union. So it might have, well,
So did nobody contest that when the contract came through
Well,
for it
the-
to change? Because legally, like, if just a regular employee comes in for like a meeting, you have to pay them 3 hours. So that if you come in, if a regular non-union employee comes into work for an hour meeting, you have to pay them a minimum of 3 hours. So it just seems crazy that you would have to
Well,
exceed the law.
it was collectively bargained. I know these guys they didn't get a new contract in, I don't know, 6 years, maybe 5 years.
It's a long time, yeah.
A long time. It was a real long time.
Yeah.
They asked for a few things. We cut it down a little bit. We gave them a few things. We didn't give them a few things. And overall, we thought the contract to be fair. But your question is very valid about
Yeah.
4 hours, you know.
I just don't know, just because in my business, we don't have to work with that, so I just didn't know if there was a plan for that
No.
kind of stuff. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. It's something me and Rick are going to have to discuss going forward as the contract.
A year of this contract, in 3 years it'll be 5 hours, then it'll be 6 hours.
Exactly.
And then you're gonna be paying them for a full day.
Exactly. That's what.
Yeah, I mean,
we're
I guess that's the point is that you always just want to make sure it's fair.
Absolutely.
And
We definitely want to be
and by the
fair.
way, 4 might be fair, I have no, so I'm not saying anything about fair, just,
Just so everyone knows, that's comparable to other contracts.
Sure.
I looked at Mansfield's contract, I looked at a couple different other contracts. Some of them get 4, some of them get 5. But still, your question's valid, it's something we want to discuss going forward.
I guess the biggest thing for me is when you look into it, can you just find out if you can do that, right? So they get called into whatever, because of this thing that happens, is there a way to say, here's 2 other hours worth of work I need you to do, have a good day? Do you know
I
what
think
mean?
that's what Sean was saying, though.
Yeah.
The other department head had, correct? Tried
Yes.
to accomplish that.
Yes, that
Public
was correct.
safety department.
Right, that tried to do that, but, and lost in court.
And lost in court that they asked them to do,
That they
Right.
could not ask them to
Be
do
called in for
additional
one
work
thing,
during that
right?
Do
time.
other
But then my
Yeah.
other point of raising it
Right.
is one department head tried it with his bargaining unit. So
Right.
the question ultimately came down to is, we under management rights, have we tried that under our collective bargaining agreement?
The contract was just signed not too long ago, so we haven't really.
But in theory, that could be done whether it's a 4-hour minimum or a 3-hour minimum.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, that's right, the question is just
Yes.
exercising management rights if
But
that
we
is right.
we also
in the
have to keep in
argument.
mind that the majority of these calls are probably in the middle of the night.
Yeah, well, that's,
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, you want
What are you
someone
gonna do
out.
at 3?
There's always work to be done. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'm on board.
unless it's in front of your house at 2 o'clock in the morning and, the guy's out there.
I mean, it's-
161 Old Farm Road.
these pump stations, that's the thing that's on Old Farm Road?
Yes, sir.
That's the one that they speed up and down
told
all
them
the
to stop.
time and blow through the stop signs because they
I
don't
told
have to
them to
adhere to
stop.
them. Yeah, they're not stopping.
All right, I'll tell them again.
Yeah.
I'll tell them again.
For the record, I don't live on Old Farm Road. I live nowhere near that. It was just a management rights question.
Listen, I'm looking for that.
We had the same one on Walnut Street. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible at direction.
Yeah. Well, we
There's
have-
another one behind us on Extreme Circle.
Extreme Circle, we have 13 departments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And 2 flow metering chambers that measure the flow leaving the towns. We don't have our own wastewater treatment plant, so.
We should definitely have a tour, so, I mean, it's a
You
really
guys can come down
kinda,
whenever you want. You
um,
guys can see the place, it's great.
It is
Yeah.
very
I
interesting.
just know on Monday mornings at 9 o'clock, this thing next to my house goes on, and I had no idea what it
That's
was.
your
So you just
emergency
sit-
backup generator exercising.
There you go.
That's what that, every Monday morning for 18 minutes.
Yeah, it literally turns on, you can hear it on.
Yep.
That's when the
Exercise.
coyote wakes up and goes for a walk.
We'll get them.
All right.
He lives right behind the sewer station.
Seriously?
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty
You
neat.
see him every morning at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
going for a walk. Big one. Yep.
Good to know.
Tell you guys- tell you guys to be
It's
careful.
it's big.
Well,
I believe we were moving on to
Electricity?
seasonal stipends,
seasonal stipend.
unless, I think.
5143.
That one stayed the same. I think the
Yeah.
only one that I had question on there was slight change on on-call status budget.
Yeah, on call, they got the guys at DPW union got a slight bump in pay, hourly rate, contractual, so that they get 8 hours to be on call, so that raises that number too.
Can you go over the seasonal stipend?
That's $800 stipend for myself and my assistant for plowing snow. That's been there, we've been getting that for
Yep.
10 years, probably more, 16 years.
As long as I've been here.
Yes.
So
That's
Yeah,
just
the
if you guys-
vacation.
If you guys are in an emergency, you get to spend it, or if you guys get to, like actually reap the benefit of getting paid for that?
Yes.
Yes.
Which one?
The second.
So they
Yeah.
get paid
Yeah,
for
I-
going
I-
out during the storms and actually plowing and.
Yeah, no, it's great. Be able to block.
And then the sick leave incentive, that's just an estimate. If people don't call in sick for 6 months, they get paid 2 days. They get 2 days pay. So it's just it's a guessing game. I don't know who's gonna call in sick or not call in sick for 6-month intervals in fiscal year 2019. It's impossible to predict. So I just leave that number there.
Vacation buyback went from 0 to.
Yep, that's contractual obligations.
New in
Is that
new in the contract.
New in the contract, okay. I was wondering if someone was leaving or.
No.
Good. All right, electricity staying the same?
Yeah, electricity, that powers our 13 pump stations, floor metering chambers, sewer department garage and office. Gas for heat. That is for natural gas for the sewer department office and the garages. And it runs five of the 12 emergency backup generators, natural gas. They run on natural gas. The one on Wolf Farm is natural gas, so you know. Building repairs, no change. Vehicle maintenance. Vehicle repairs, is that what we have? Vehicle repair and maintenance, sorry, I got that wrong. 6,000, that's, sewer department has 5 vehicles. We have a Jetta, a big Vector, and a Godwin pump that line item funds repairs to those vehicles. And then, general maintenance, that stayed the same. That's just pump station pots, gaskets, pipes, valves, anything to do with pump stations, basically. We do our own work. Some other towns, they'll call in, if they get a pump station failure, they'll call in a company. Holbrook does it, Whitman does it, they don't touch it. We do our own. We save money.
Could we do that for them?
And
What's that?
Could we do that for them? Like, since your guys know how to do that?
Oh, our guys know how to do everything, yeah.
That's what I'm saying, like, could you?
Could they? But I don't know if
it's one of the things just we've talked about with the fire department, Holbrook started
Oh, yeah.
being basically the call center for a bunch of surrounding towns.
Oh, really?
Several
physically we
years
could.
back.
Technically, we could. but-
That's what I mean, like,
Might be
maybe
something
that's,
to explore.
I don't know if that's part of that CBA thing, again, I have no idea, but maybe that's a way that we could, you guys could actually increase the budget or something, or more money.
Yeah. Yeah, something definitely look into. Alarms. They monitor, we use that line item to fund the monitoring of the pump stations and the office and the garages. So that hasn't gone up in 8 years. I don't know why they keep the price the same, but I'm not complaining. Education and training, that's just to renew certifications, wastewater treatment plant certifications, collection system certifications, fine space training, things of that nature. That's the same. Let's see. Postage, same, 7,000. That's just for monthly billing, quarterly billing, general mailing, lien letters.
And that's for just, so these next two, the ones that sort of, I don't understand those, so the postage and the telephone, like what, can you explain what that is, sort of?
Yeah, postage is just basically stamps for the bills. that
You
go out.
guys sending stamps out to residents to pay the bill?
No, them
No,
paying our, sending
They're
the mailing the bill to
the
us.
residents.
Yeah, that's what I mean, what, sending it to the.
But we have to put a stamp on our own bill to mail back.
No, but I mean, like, they're sending it to us. Is there any way that we can figure out like an online thing or something that might be a little bit more beneficial than paying that or not?
Yeah, I mean, is everyone gonna do that, you know? Does everyone
Or
want to
even
pay?
just me making it an option, right, to try to like maybe get to where you guys don't have to put postage on, I don't know how
So-
many things.
It is an option though, isn't it?
No.
No.
Is it just the water is maybe?
Treasurer's talking about it. Yeah, the
Oh,
one.
None of it, yeah.
No,
Treasurer wants
if
to
we-
do it, I talked to
If
her.
we went to a town online billing, I'm assuming that would be something that you would be,
Yeah,
that sewer would become part of. I
definitely.
think that would be a large project that has hidden costs within it. I know doing like online transactions, there are usually fees involved with the people the money is moving through.
I don't even mean
Someone's-
online transaction,
What?
I just mean like, instead of these
Online
guys
no-
having to like
online
take off a
notification
stamp,
of your
but-
bill?
yeah,
No, I don't, we don't, we have a meter, like a postage meter that just run through.
I got
There's
it.
no water department, do you?
What happens with the billing, the actual monthly billing, we pay a bill to Mass Mills, we are combined with the water department, that those both together.
Sorry about that.
So
It's not actual
a
statements.
digital company prints all our bills and mails them out for us, we don't actually put stamps on. We put stamps on things like lien waivers.
Yep, I got you.
But the actual billing, we're combined with the water department, we were looking into a new system
Yep.
that would do online, but it didn't work out for either
No.
one of us, so we're staying with the current system we have for now.
And was it just, it was antiquated or just not like good enough or?
Yeah, it wouldn't do a lot of the things that the water department needed, so all of our meters are read by the water, all of our meters are read by the water department. So that's how we put everything else together, but it wasn't working with their meters and the way they read them.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a sewer meter for a
Right.
resident.
They just charge you what the water, if
Yeah,
you
it
use,
was.
if you use the water,
Yeah,
then you're
exactly.
charged for it as sewer also.
Absolutely.
So,
Someone could invent a residential sewer meter, they'd be rich. You asked about the telephone?
I'm gonna try to.
It's just lit up on your
The telephone pays for all the guys' cell phones.
Yep.
That's where we get our alarms, text message and redundant phone call. For alarms.
So how many cell phones does the department pay for?
7.
That's
Seven.
$700 a month for cell phones and probably $300 a month for your office phones.
Yeah, and fax machine, and 2 modems at the flow meter change. Modem at Rockland flow meter.
$80
Modem
for 2
at
modems,
Rockland.
$30 for a fax line.
Say it
Do
again?
that?
I said $40 for a modem, a monthly modem fee, $35 for a fax line on average.
Yep.
$100 for a cell phone, $300, $300 to $400 for an office phone. Especially if you're on a VoIP, you're probably running
Yeah.
$400.
And then other purchase services, that's the big one. We use that line item for everything, wet well cleaning. We don't have our own huge vacuum truck that can clean out pump station wet wells, so we have to contract that out. We use this line item to pay electrical services, for an electrician to come in at the pump stations. It's about one of the only things we're not supposed to do anyway.
Good.
We don't do.
In that one about that truck you're talking about, you're saying you're not supposed to do that one? Or you just don't have that?
They don't have.
We
the
don't
truck.
have that truck.
Is that truck incredibly expensive?
Yeah, it's probably $500,000.
But we pay $125 every year-ish?
No.
Not
we
for
pay
that.
But
probably-
that's not the only thing in this line?
No,
Yep.
that, we probably pay about $7,000 a year for that,
Oh.
wet well cleaning.
Yep.
Then we have to have the wastewater sampled, we use that line item for that. We have to have flow meters calibrated, generator maintenance. So the plug line hasn't changed in years, it's been the same one.
How close do we usually?
We get close. We get close, we're definitely over 100, probably about 100. Yeah, we're close to that every year, very close. Let's see. Office supplies, no change. Gas and oil.
What was office supplies for highway?
Yes,
That was like,
$200.
does the sewer department use like 50 times as many
Oh,
office
having
supplies?
less, the highway department used to have a much larger office supply budget line item, but we combined the offices, so I just left this one. I left this one alone, and lowered theirs to 200.
I was just the discrepancy between the
Oh,
two.
good
was-
question. Good question. But
Where-
we save money
So
by.
sorry, where are we?
We're at office, the last line of page 37.
Got it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
just commenting, the highway department's office supplies were $200,
Oh, wow.
sewer was $5,200,
So
so,
you just took more on this line?
yeah, when they combined into.
The highway
Yeah, we
department's not allowed
combined.
to have pens.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't, no way.
no post-it notes.
No definitely no Post-its.
And then, let's see, gas and oil. Do that? Gas and oil?
Yes.
All right. Let's see. No change, that's for the fuel for the 5 vehicles, jetter. Jetter is a machine that cleans the pipes during the blockages and also just keeps them clean in general. And also 4 of our backup generators are diesel, run by diesel fuel, so use that line item for that. That might change. In intermunicipal, I dropped that.
The A3 ATM, A4 ATM, that all.
Article
So
3,
the articles,
Oh, the articles, okay.
Yeah, those are just articles.
we should definitely go over those at the end, though,
Yes.
just so that we can,
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Usually they're not there like that. I lowered the intermunicipal because of the new IMA we worked out with the city of Brockton, it lowered our bills.
oh. Will you explain that? Because we do have new people and,
Yeah, we have an intermunicipal agreement with the city of Brockton and the town of Rockland for wastewater treatment because we don't have our own plant. And for years,
like how many years? A lot of years.
yeah, a lot of years, and then even after the IMA was expired with Brockton, we were getting overcharged, but I don't know, it seemed like a lot of money in our eyes. They were charging us for treatment, and they were also charging us what they call the transport fee. Back in 1998, the town agreed to sign the intermunicipal agreement with the transport fee for an additional 500,000 gallons. But the transport fee went from $200,000 a year to, in fiscal year 2014, was probably $600,000. And you couple that with the treatment charges, and it was, our Brockton bill was coming in at 1.5 million.
Wow.
And I think the latest one we got for FY16 was under 1.2.
That's great.
And we pay Rockland probably $100,000 a year, because 5% of our sewage goes to Rockland, 95 to Brockton. That's why the Brockton bill's so high. So again, it's also predicated on how much flow we send both towns, the town and city. So in essence, it's a guessing.
Sure.
But they weren't allowing us
And, yep.
any like, they weren't allowing
Yeah.
us to increase,
And with-
so we
with the
had
new-
that.
So that was where there were sort of holds on new development.
Yes, we were limited to 1 million gallons a day under the old IMA. With the new IMA, not only do we get a new formula to lower our bills, we got $500,000 in additional gallons
Okay.
a day. So now we have 1.5 million gallons a day to send to the city of Brockton. 2 years ago, it was 1 million gallons a day, and we would hover, it's predicated on the weather. If we got a lot of rain, it would be over 1 million, it would be 1.2 some days, but it was based on a 365-day rolling average. So it's
And
a lot
this is
of-
all sewage, right?
What's that?
This is all sewage?
Correct. So,
And we're tied to Brockton because there isn't another option.
there's no other option. Yeah, but the new deal we worked out with them, a lot of people worked really hard on that. It took 2
Yeah.
years, monthly meetings for 2 years to hammer out that agreement with Brockton, and it saved us a lot of money.
And why do we do the 5% to Rockland, if Rockland can handle it? Just I only ask because I literally don't know.
Geography reasons.
So it's just easier for something to get over there?
Yeah.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, in the 80s,
Yeah.
Rockland will let Abington tie in that section of town, but they didn't want it anymore. They're only allotted, Rockland's wastewater treatment plant is allotted for 2.5 million gallons a day. Rockland's is 18 million gallons a day. So they can't accept any more flow. Rockland, really, they're kind of tapped out, so that's where we stand with that. And transfer out is the same. That just pays for the sewer departments, incurred costs in the general fund, like health insurance, workers' comp, et cetera. So that's where we stand.
And I think there's a sewer department enterprise fund, so.
Yes.
Their soft costs recouped by the general fund.
I couldn't hear you, Rick. I'm sorry.
I was just explaining that because the sewer department is an enterprise fund, that's just the recouping of the soft costs from the enterprise to the general fund.
So I have, do you guys have revenue on that, on those? I don't think you had them last year, but I can give you a quick overview of what I anticipate FY19 revenues. I expect a lot more revenue due to the added gallons that we got. So, well, overall, I I anticipate FY19 revenue to be about 2.6 million. 2.6 million.
And in 18 it was coming in at?
2.45. But now we have a few more developments going on, so they owe us systems development fees. We got a lot of money for systems development fees. More users equals more solar usage charges. So our solar revenue is more than enough to cover the solar budget.
We'd had a sewer moratorium, right?
Yeah, we have one.
And that's been lifted how long ago?
Year and a half. We went from 1 million gallons a day to 1.5.
And that was a year and a half.
Yeah, and right now, our 365-day rolling average is at 989,000 gallons a day. So we're 500 and some odd thousand. God bless you.
Excellent.
We're a ways away from it.
We're a ways away from it, so if you want to build a skyscraper or something. Yeah, we have. But a lot of people work really hard. A lot of volunteers, selectmen, or solar commissioner volunteered their time during the middle of the day to hammer out that nail. It was there by tons of credit for that. We're having a park and rec.
Yep.
What page, just so we know?
This is page 27.
Recreation.
Thanks.
Everything's basically the same. Just shifting a little money from temporary employees up to full-time. No, vice versa.
Vice versa.
Vice versa. Sorry about that. But this, we pay for, the college kids who come in and help us mow the fields, line the fields during the summer, during baseball seasons and stuff. That's what the temporary employees line item is for. And then the groundskeeping supplies, left the same. That's for paint, for the line stripe for soccer fields and baseball fields and football fields, irrigation maintenance. That's just grass seed, infield mix for the baseball fields, stone dust for the softball fields. We fund all that stuff through that line item right there. Someday I'd like to see it go a little higher, but anyway.
How are the quality of the fields?
Quality of the fields, doing all right. We're doing good. I think the football field's in pretty good shape. I think Riley field's in really good shape. Softball fields are nice. The baseball fields could use a little work.
What? Sorry, go ahead. You can finish talking about the field.
They could use I think the baseball fields need to be actually leveled. It would probably be better suited for CPA monies.
That's a great idea.
You know, the mound and everything. It's just
It's
off.
uneven, yeah.
It's uneven. There's a big lip behind the infield skin, which is just safety hazard. And the mound is, I don't know, it just needs to be, I think it's above what we can do.
Where are these fields?
Behind the
Very-
Frollo, and then behind,
Yeah.
Route 58 is,
Oh,
That's a little
yeah.
league.
Little
Like on the
League.
way to Target.
Arnold,
You know, like it's on the right, on the way to
Arnold is
Target, yeah.
across from the depot.
And the Woodsdale.
Mm.
Woodsdale. But I did get approval for a new fence for Woodsdale through the CPA.
Is that the Wheeler Field or behind Woodsdale?
behind
Behind the
Woodsdale.
Woodsdale. We already have funding through the CPA for a new fence at Labor Field, but I just don't know where to put it because I don't know what we're doing with the building yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
And we got a new approval for a new fence along the Plymouth Street ball field, and we got approval for a new backstop at Arnold Field.
Oh.
Great.
Nice.
So that was gonna be my question about the Lather Fields. Was that your budget, that parking or whatever is going on there, where the Boy Scout building was?
I would like to see it at parking lot. You know, I would like to see it at parking lot, but I think they developed a committee for that.
Oh, okay.
The spare building committee or spare property committee, I think.
Do you know the answer to that one?
I'm sorry.
The renovations of the Lather Fields and
Yeah.
Boy Scout house parking lot.
Yeah, what are we doing with the Boy Scout house? And next to Lakeland Field, don't we have a committee that's handling that? Spare building committee?
Well, no,
I mean, not here.
Surplus building committee.
You gotta go.
And that's rather than a fund committee per se, but the selectmen have not made a decision yet in terms of whether or not they want to sell part of that lot or not. That's kind of
We were just saying it would be good if it would be a parking lot.
well, that's just it, but it's actually a bigger lot than most people even, it looks like visually, so, but, they have some, in fact, as of recently as this week, members of the board have actually requested some additional maps and that, some other sort of properties that, because at the very least, there's going to be additional parking there for that field, but whether or not there's actually enough space for them to subdivide that and sell that as a buildable lot. I know they're skeptical as to that, but again, they've requested some additional maps for that kind of facility.
Did you guys want to go over,
Sewer
take a
rates?
quick look at this? Hey, Bobby, you want to go?
Yes.
This is a, Louis Stands sewer rate wise. Try to get this to you guys once a year, every year at this time. These are just communities that participated in the survey, not every community we did. So, we haven't had a sewer rate increase since 2008. 2008.
Good, keep up the good work.
Absolutely.
So when I look at this list, the town that I would see that we're kind of most like is probably Holbrook. I'm thinking like size-wise and,
I think so. I would think so.
we're getting a really good deal.
Yes. Definitely a lot of good work done
Yeah,
by-
we have
by
the best staff down there, awesome board of soil commissioners. I can't say enough about the people. And then the next is, next handout is just the 5-year capital plan that I just tried yesterday. I don't know if you guys want to check it out or take a quick look at it. Or just keep it for future reference.
So would things at the top on the FY19 be,
This is required by law to create a 5-year capital plan. Challenge required by law. So that's all this is.
Would they be in that order?
Yes. If somehow this money was available.
Right, it would be in that order.
But, I know where the town stands and things of that nature,
How
but
many,
it's my job to define what we need.
how many heavy-duty pickup trucks do you have for the highway department?
Probably about 11 or 10.
And how many do you use?
Probably 7.
And
The
if,
others are just old.
is this the oldest, or is it?
Yeah, that's the oldest.
That's the oldest.
Yeah.
And what would the next,
I think in 2 years I have one. Oh, no, actually, the next year I was in 1994.
okay.
Excuse me, 2021. It's in 1994. And on the last handout, it's paperclip to this is just this is the first thing, one of the first things on our capital plan is a new building over there at the highway department. Mess, the heat in the outside, it's a safety hazard.
You've been fixing it over the years
Fixing it
with,
over the years. It's leaking water everywhere, and just put it on you guys' radar. Put it on your radar someday. I know it's not gonna happen anytime soon.
duct tape and gum?
Yeah, exactly.
how old is that building?
It was built in 1960.
Season.
Yeah.
Broken in.
But that's that. I mean,
Do you have any warrant items?
warrant items. No, just this,
Yes, you do.
have a warrant item?
Yeah, well, articles.
Oh, you wanna go over those last?
Yeah.
Those are from,
They're from last year.
those are from last year.
Okay.
I don't know
But
why
are
they're-
they,
Do you have any for this year?
Let's see.
Or are you planning
Yeah, he
on
just had 'em
putting
put
forth
that together.
For this year?
We will get,
Manhole, stormwater. So that was
because
phase
we have,
one.
we have money in the solar undesignated, we'll be able to fund the solar items. We won't be able to fund the other.
Okay, so wait a minute, I just wanna.
So for the capital,
The manholes and the stormwater management,
Correct.
who the,
SOAR undesignated.
can you just go over how that as undesignated fund works
Yeah,
real
it's
quick?
pretty simple. Pretty simple. FY '19 pans out to the way we see it. We'll have, the budget is 2.4 million and change, and the anticipated revenue is close to 2.6. So that would be $200,000 extra. We're going SOAR undesignated. So it just adds up over the time, and then the money we save from the intermunicipal agreement with Brockton. Last year, I think I had, I budgeted 1.4 something, and the bill came in at 1.2, so that $200,000 or whatever's extra goes in SOAR undesignated. Can't be touched unless there's a vote at town meeting.
But that can then fund the cars and the trucks and stuff
Absolutely.
like that.
For the sewer.
Yeah, just for the sewer department?
Just for the sewer.
That's the
Not,
law of the
not even to the
enterprise.
water or anything else, just sewer?
correct, only sewer, because it's the sewer,
Enterprise, we have an
Enterprise.
enterprise account. You can only use.
basically, the sewer pays for itself.
The sewer pays for itself. That's the whole idea behind an enterprise account.
Yep. Could
Water
we-
has
It's a good concept.
Could we switch it at all and to get it, or is that just like a way bigger question than can we switch it?
I believe it's the law.
Yeah, it's a
that-
law. Yeah, it's a law.
No,
Like, it's not like a town,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got
it's not a
Yeah,
town.
That's what I wanted to ask.
it's a,
Municipal law.
Yep.
It's a municipal law, yes.
Your sewer rates are only supposed to pay for that service,
Yep.
associated costs.
So-
that way you don't get gouged.
That way you don't have people jacking up their sewer rates to pay for
Yeah,
all sorts of other things throughout the town.
Mr. Chairman, I don't feel like going into a libertarian rant, so I appreciate the absence of taxation without representation.
I appreciate that.
Why we sit him down there?
Got anything else for us?
So no,
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna ask for questions, but Barbara's already jumped in.
These are
you gotta
page,
go over
page 38. Yeah. These are last year's articles
the, okay.
that got paid out of the capital plan because we have money in the sewer. And for this year, we have line in phase one manholes still, it's ongoing.
Okay.
It's cheaper than replacing the manholes. They have a life expectancy of 30 years. According to some engineers, I think it's higher, but whatever. But some of these are 35, 40, 45 years old, so we're lining them.
Mm-hmm.
And it just gives the manhole structural integrity similar to that of replacement.
Okay.
And it's a third of the cost. You don't have to open up the road or anything.
Excellent.
So we're continuing that in 2019, and what else? We're just continuing the MS4. That's a federal mandate, and the state mandate, we have no choice but to fund that. They're trying to keep the waters of the United States clean.
So no articles for highway, park and rec.
No articles, just the capital plan.
Other questions? Mr. Tyler? Dr. Tyler, sorry.
Could we get the balance, the current balance of the sewer and designated fund account right now?
It is 1.1 million.
You got it. Thank you very much. Sorry, John, I was looking at her because she had all the other data. I figured out.
No, I asked the town accountant. That's not an answer.
So yeah, that's what he.
We good?
I think
All right,
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thanks, Jean.
Now we have the South Shore VOTEC. Come on down.
Hi.
Good evening.
Good to see you.
What's this?
And then on your. How are ya?
Very good. Thanks for having us back.
Thank you for coming. It's always great to have you.
My name is Tom Pickens, Superintendent at South Shore. I'm joined by your representative to our school committee, Tom Petrozelli. I have, Tom Pickens, Superintendent, Tom Petrozelli, Abington's representative to the South Shore Regional School Committee.
First names are hard to remember.
Just shout it out, one of us will answer. So it appears that I've learned a lot in the last hour and sitting in the audience, so I think I'm here tonight to pay for your snow. Let me walk you through various documents I have here. I'll make some educated guesses as to what might be most important, and be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. In the last several years, I've always brought a one-page summary, which is typically cherry-picked from a presentation I do at our December school committee meeting, which shows some recent accomplishments and goals that we've set. The middle of the document talks about some of the headliners or the drivers in this budget. At the top of the page, you will find that we're seeking an overall budget increase of about 3.73%. However, tonight, we are seeking a reduction in Abington's assessment of $394,000, which you will see later in the document. This is largely precipitated by a reduction in enrollment, a reduction of 28 students, which is very cleanly translating into a lower assessment. And so I'll have some numbers to show you as well. And you can see the enrollment at the bottom of that one-page summary. I'll go through some of the headlines in just a moment. The second document you might find interesting for several reasons. Our treasurer, Jim Coughlin, puts this together to help show you assessment numbers and how we arrive at those numbers from various approaches. The cover page, if you read it from right to left, it will show you at the top our budget, our proposed budget for our existing budget for 18, proposed budget for 19. The revenue sources that you will see, you will see increases in Chapter 70, non-resident tuition, and regional transportation. In the Chapter 70 money, modest increase based on the governor's budget that came out on January 24th. The non-resident tuition is up substantially due to an increase in non-resident enrollment. That increased tuition is essentially not only covering our budget increase in the aggregate, but we're actually assessing our 8 communities about $60,000 less, which you will see on the line that reads district assessments. And we're also anticipating with a slightly higher degree of confidence a larger amount of regional transportation reimbursement. We are not allowed to charge bus fees. We do get state reimbursement. It is an annual political decision. It's not a guaranteed amount. So we tend to be conservative. You may or may not recall, or it may not have been across your desk, but at our July 2017 school committee meeting, we actually lowered the assessments for our 8 communities by a small sum of $60,000 because we got more regional transportation money than we thought. But we think that we're going to get somewhere in the vicinity of 65%. So we're able to make a more robust projection, which lowers the local assessment. And there you can see at the bottom of that first page, the assessment breakdown by town, and there's Abington at the top, going from 2.03 down to 1.63. The next 2 pages, if you, for those of you that are new, I'll do just a quick walkthrough, but hopefully it's self-explanatory. For those of you here last year, these pages are very similar. Our regional agreement, beyond what the Chapter 70 statutory formula assigns for a town's minimum contribution, our regional agreement dictates how we calculate the rest. So if you look on page 2 in yellow, you will see that we have some debt from a 2010 roof project. The debt is calculated by looking at the 3 fiscal years prior to the debt authorization. These numbers you're looking at are the actual enrollments for each of our towns. And then on the subsequent page, you can look back and forth. Those raw numbers get converted to percentages. So debt by definition is calculated by looking at the 3 fiscal years preceding the debt, and then that debt is fixed for the life of the debt. We assess capital in blue slightly differently. That is done on a 3-year rolling average. So in this case, we looked at the 3 fiscal years preceding, and the formula, that 1 year rolls in, 1 year rolls out as each fiscal year goes forward. Page 3 takes those numbers, aggregates them, and calculates a percentage. So for instance, on page 3, if we looked at the column for capital costs, Abington's share of capital costs would be 23.92%, because that was Abington's share of the in-district enrollment. That has been our formula for forever. But we want to supply this information because on the 4th page, where we break down each town's assessment, it's a logical question. How did you arrive at these numbers? So if we just look at Abington's line from right to left, again, you'll see the total assessment amount, $1,637,607. And then as you scan from right to left, you can pick whatever column you'd like. That number gets calculated through a prescribed formula. The largest chunk of the 1.6 is the first column, the minimum contribution determined by the state. The second column on non-resident tuition, that is the money we take in, and we essentially use it to lower assessments. That's why you see the parentheses. Above the minimum are costs beyond the minimum contribution that are not considered transportation, debt, or capital. And so that's how the number is arrived at. And then the last page of the document shows you in summarized form a 1-year look back. So there is Abington's 2018 assessment, followed by the 2019 assessment and the delta, a 19.43% reduction. I'd be happy to stop here if you'd like, or feel free to interrupt. I'm not on a script, so.
I know that there are often questions about this particular page.
Certainly, we can always look back if it bubbles up afterwards, so.
Anyone have?
I definitely have a question. Why are we paying the most? Just as we have the most amount of kids that go.
So if you look, if you look at the column on the far right, the FY19 assessments.
What page?
Sorry, page
2,
4.
4?
Yep.
Got it, thanks.
The far right column is what each one, I think that was actually on the cover page as well.
Yeah, it's on the cover page.
It's easier to see there. Rockland pays the most, they also have the highest enrollment. Whitman pays next, actually no, we pay
Abington.
next, then Whitman. Whitman's current enrollment is higher than ours, but there's a formula, and this goes to the minimum contribution that the state
Yes.
provides, where the state determines some concoction of not only how many people you have going, but how much your town is able to pay.
Prior to 1993, it was as simple as your total budget, take off your state aid, and divide proportionally by the number of students. Once that formula went into effect, then it became, as we just said, based on a town's ability to pay. So it is not exactly in proportion. And since the reform law came into effect, one would expect that more affluent communities in terms of income and real estate value would have a higher per pupil cost. And so we've had a sliding scale of per pupil costs within our eight towns since that time.
Can you remind me of the name of that formula?
Sure, it's Chapter 70 formula.
Yeah, but the Chapter 70 formula.
I don't remember the name of it.
No.
Foundation budget formula.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the one.
And is it just, so Cohasset only has a couple kids that go to school here?
Yes.
And even though they may be a community that has more, it doesn't matter. You said there's a minimum, is that just basically they're at the minimum?
The way the state will look at it is they will look at all of the public school children in the town of Cohasset. They will look to see how many are in the Cohasset public schools, how many are with us. Then they will assign minimum contributions based off of those numbers. About 70% of a town's assessment would be based off of that formula, and everything else would be, as I described earlier, with the debt and the capital and whatnot.
something else. So did your non-resident number go, like,
Yes.
from the same town, or?
We had a large increase in non-resident enrollment from Pembroke. That was the largest garage. And so the state sets a per pupil non-resident rate, and we collect that tuition and then apply it to the next year's budget.
Because it's more than double.
Yes, indeed, yes. So this is an anomaly in the sense that if everything stayed the same, then if whatever budget increases we have for fiscal '20, we would be adjusting accordingly. But for this year, increased outside revenue, lower assessments for our community. Any other questions on this? And then I can go to the other documents. The next document, I will not, I'll point out a few pages you may find interesting. This is a PowerPoint I did for our December school committee meeting. Speaks in larger part to our zero-based budgeting approach and the goals we're setting. But I'd like to direct your attention to some of the numbers pages. I'd say that on the third piece of paper you'll find a summary of the headliners where I talk about capital, where part of the capital request this year is for our stabilization fund, a topic I'd like to speak to at the end regarding renovations and feasibility for modernization of the building, as well as some upgrades to instructional technology and facilities. We have a couple of new positions. I had a machining teacher retire, and we have instead put in a paraprofessional, a retired machinist. So we're going to go with that approach where I have one machining teacher and a paraprofessional working in the machining shop, as well as a part-time custodian. Our custodians also drive buses for us, as we own or lease our bus fleet, employ our own drivers as well. This was a good year for me to be able to move some existing positions off of federal grants. There's some volatility with federal grants. I don't think it's immediate, but I have an adjustment counselor and a Title I math teacher and a newly opened horticulture and landscape program. We started that program this year with 9th graders, and that teacher is being paid off of a federal Perkins grant. That's being moved onto the budget. This budget also will include a potential increase in transportation costs. We are going to go out for a successor lease for some of our bus fleet. I anticipate recommending that we have 14 buses that we deploy to our 8 communities, and I see us looking to go from leasing 7 buses to 11. It should reduce our repair costs, but we do have some stabilization funds to help offset that. The existing lease we have runs through the end of this calendar year, so we'll go out to bid sometime in the summer if potential bidders plenty of time to come back with bids. We'll look at, we've had great success. I'm very pleased. We went with propane buses, and they've been fantastic. And so we'll go out looking to see what the market fetches for propane and diesel. So there's a little extra money in there in the event that we're going to be leasing more than the 7 we're currently leasing now. Health insurance costs were estimated in this budget at a 12% increase. But I'm happy to report that we had some reductions in overall consumption of health insurance. So the actual dollar increase in our health insurance projection on about $1.3 million is under 20,000. So from fiscal 18 to fiscal 19, the increase on about 1.3 million is only, it's very modest. It's very low. So I'm certainly happy that the projections from Mayflower are going in that direction. I mentioned non-resident and regional transportation already, and then I point out just for any apples-to-apples comparisons that there are sections of our regional school district budget that are typically not found in a school district budget. So about $2.2 million of our proposed 13.4 goes towards costs that would normally be on the town side of the budget, as it listed there. All the insurances, Plymouth County retirement, OPEB, payroll taxes, etc. The slide below unpacks the personnel that I mentioned earlier. Some other smaller personnel needs are in there. And then the back of that piece of paper unpacks the capital requests. The itemized capital requests at the top, followed by a pie chart that shows that the bulk of the capital is for stabilization. And the reason I want to transition out of this document and just point out the next document is with that conversation on stabilization. We were fortunate to get approval for a stabilization fund a few years ago. And I believe that is a major, has been a major plus for us to be able to plan for the future. We have a building, for those of you that haven't you've seen it over the years, the school is about 125,000 square feet. 80,000 square feet was built in 1962. And in 1992, the school moved from the Early Childhood Center, or what we would call the Abington campus, came over to Webster Street in Hanover, and merged in 1993. So there was about a 40,000 square foot addition. And what we undertook back in the fall, and just finished last month, was we contracted with an engineering firm to do a facilities audit to help us with some long-range capital planning. We've always had a long-range capital plan for vocational equipment. We do very well with swapping out equipment. It's never a crisis, it's never a budget buster. And we do very, very well with maintenance. I'm always pleased to have the feedback of people walking into our building, especially the part that's over 50 years old, saying, wow, this looks great. That is exactly what I want to have folks say decades into the future. But we do recognize that the time is coming that we are going to have to make some infrastructure modernizations beyond what we would reasonably ask for in an annual assessment increase. So we had a firm come in to do two things. One is to take a look at what our infrastructure needs are, the immediate ways that we can protect the assets we have and put price tags to it, and then also look at some educational vision, which I don't need to talk to you folks about as you have this wonderful school over here. We have applied to the MSBA. This is the 4th year in a row that we've put in an application. We do not need a new school. We need to renovate what we have and probably add another 30,000 square feet in order to bring the school up to what we would say, or MSBA would say, is an acceptable modern standard. So this firm came in, they looked at our existing footprint, they compared how we use our instructional space with MSBA square footage recommendations, and they gave us a lay of the land. So if I could just, I'll walk you through this one. There's a lot of information here. I have cherry-picked out several pages. This complete report, it's got to be important if it's in a 3-ring binder. This complete report is on our school website if you're ever interested. So there's an introduction from the engineering firm and their subcontractors. The next section I excerpted out is a list of 42 recommended infrastructure, I'll call it maintenance if you will, items that would not add another kid to the building, would not add another square foot to the school. But there's about $11 million worth of infrastructure needs. Of that $11 million, a good chunk of it, we would not consider tackling unless we were invited into an MSBA project. But there are some items, and I'll direct your attention to, say, the middle of the document. You see 2 very narrow columns, one called SA and one called LP. SA means standalone. I asked the engineers to designate the recommendations that we could very likely accomplish without having it be part of an MSBA project. And then the others designated with a double asterisk, which would be considered long-range plan. So what I'm saying, what I'm using, hopefully my time wisely tonight, is to not only talk about fiscal 19, but to let you know that we're probably going to be engaging with the school committee over the next 6 months to begin talking and unpacking these recommendations, spreading them out over a 10-year matrix, but looking very carefully at those short-term projects that we probably need to tackle even prior to an MSBA invitation. If we get invited into MSBA, again, you folks know this, it's 3-4 years out before you see the fruits of your labor. I anticipate looking at projects such as replacing the roof over the 1992 addition, which they estimated about $1.2 million. Doing infrastructure upgrades to our septic system, they estimate about $250,000. Sprinkling the 1962 building, $500,000. So this is not, there's no cost to this part of my pitch tonight. This is merely saying we probably have $2 or $3 million worth of upgrades to maintain the fixed asset. And the question I'll be asking the school committee to consider is, would we want to come back to our communities in fiscal 20 a separate warrant article looking to borrow a sum of money. I don't want to say for the basics, but let me just say for the basics. The roof, windows in the 1992 edition, ADA access issues. Because if I could bring the 1962 edition up to code, then we could look at possibly a smaller edition, because I can't add a single square foot and attach it to that building without bringing the whole thing up to code. So I'm limited to any kind of expansion unless I take care of certain things first. So I don't have an immediate recommendation tonight, and the way our charter works is that we would need unanimous support. That is, a majority vote at each of our 8 town meetings. So we've got to know what we're talking about. We've got to know what we're asking for, and we've got to take the time to do it correctly. But I asked the engineers to truncate those projects that could be done in the short term. So there are definitely some items on this list. This is, I find to be very helpful, gives us a laser beam focus. Some of the things that could be less expensive, maybe they're not urgent, but we could plan for it as part of our maintenance budget or as part of smaller capital expenses. Our stabilization account has approximately $600,000 in it for anything related to feasibility or renovation. And this budget proposal would add another $250,000. I'm very pleased with that, because if MSBA invites us into their program in December of 2018 or January of 2019, we will have already launched the fiscal 20 budget proposal through the school committee. We don't get 2 bites at the apple when we come to talk to our communities. And what I wouldn't want to have happen, as you know from the process, you have 270 days to show that your communities are on board. So I need to somehow ask 8 communities, wherever they are economically, to be on board with us studying the feasibility of doing something. It is a lot easier for me to come to you and to your town meeting if I already have feasibility funds available, whereby I'm only asking for your support to be able to take the next step with MSBA. So I feel very good about that. MSBA will not say how much money you budget for feasibility, but I think we are in a very good position that were we to be invited, we would be able to handle that out of stabilization.
What gets you invited?
The tale of woe. It really comes down to, you start by listing what your priorities are. So on our statement of interest, which I uploaded earlier today and is also on our website in the same location as this report, we talk about obsolete buildings, overcrowding, need for modernization. And in my view, overcrowding means several things. We're an application school, so we can control to some extent for how many students are in the building. But I also have to say to some students, there isn't enough room in this particular vocational program because of space. But also, I'll give you just a quick for instance, all of our science labs were renovated regular classrooms. I was hired to teach at South Shore in 1994. My classroom that I taught in as an English teacher is now a science lab, 725 square feet. The Mass School Building Authority, building a brand new school, would not expect a science lab at the secondary level to be 700 plus square feet. So that's what the engineers took into consideration. Now that doesn't mean that it's a crisis, and we may end up having to prioritize where we want to reallocate space. But that's the message that we're sending. Everything in the 1960s was built to a smaller scale. And now we have the highest enrollment in school history, and we have an aging building. That's the story we tell. The good news, although it means nothing officially, I was very pleased that this past summer, the MSBA came out and did a site visit. We had applied 3 times in a row, and this 3rd time, that would have been in February of 2017, they came out to see with their own eyes what we're talking about. The original Univent heaters, the original systems, they got to see it. And again, no promises made, but I thought that was actually a step in the right direction. So we've applied, our documentation's in, and there's an April deadline. So we will spend the rest of this calendar year. We have no control over that. I will send a letter to our legislative delegation. I will let all of our state representatives and state senators know that oversee our 8 towns that we're in this pipeline. I want to raise their awareness. But our focus locally is going to be on what can we do? And if we have to borrow money, what would we borrow it for? MSBA will, they won't guarantee this, but they will retroactively reimburse. If, let's say, a year and a half from now, we're in, and back in 2019, we put on a new roof, there's the potential that some of those funds could be, we could recoup some of those funds.
If we did improvements, how would we get into the MSB? So is it how you get in is by having not great systems? So if you updated them, wouldn't that be where they'd say, no?
I'm happy to have that blessing and curse, quite honestly, because we won't let the building go into disrepair.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, there are some buildings that, and that's not I'm not saying there are communities that want that to happen, but they do have to prioritize. If there are ceilings falling in on children, those schools deserve priority. That is not our school, thus we would not be at the top of the list. But as they're able to fund projects, and as schools continue to come back and ask, I'm happy that with each year that has passed, we've been able to remove a few items from our statement of interest. We replaced 4 rooftop units, for instance, and we did that through our capital budget. And we did that through stabilization and then our capital budget. So we don't have to say to MSBA that that needs to be part of our upgrade. So we will continue to chip away at it. I just think we've reached the point that I could not say, let's take our $13 million budget and ask for $16 million and build an extra $3 million of renovating costs into 1 year. That's a croaker. But it might be feasible for us to borrow some money to tackle that and spread it out over, similar to what we did in 2010. We had a roof, it was leaking, we went to MSBA, we were part of the accelerated repair program, we got 53% reimbursement, and the debt service that you see here is the 2010 roof project, where we spread out about $126,000 over our 8 communities. That debt will roll off in December 2021, which always feels good when that old debt is leaving, just as you're ready to put some new debt on. But that's an important factor as well. So it's not a crisis, but I'd like it to not become a crisis. And so the thought process for Tom and other members of the committee will be, okay, what is the appetite of our communities? I know we had unanimous support 8 years ago. The idea was pay now, pay later. Of course you replace a roof if it needs it. And so we will take the necessary time, and we will invite folks over from all of our communities over the next calendar year so that we can show people that if we are going to come, it's not just going to be a regular presentation. We want to make sure people have boots on the ground to see what we're talking about. If we did that, there could be, the committee may decide that fiscal 20, just go for the usual, increases, maybe a little extra in capital. Let's do the septic for 250 grand, put that into capital. Let's wait another year. But those will be the conversation starters over the next 12 months. The rest of this report, after these recommendations, gets into la-la land, potential expansion options, visioning. Looks great. It's not the conversation for now. But these various schemes, from the original building to adding on in various places, is summarized on the very last page with preliminary cost table. So you want to renovate South Shore Tech and add on 30,000 square feet, it's probably $48 to $52 million, rounded up to $60 million with soft costs. Not even in my vocabulary right now. That doesn't happen without MSBA. My short game focus is on protecting the assets we have and figuring out how we can phase that in.
How much would a whole new thing be? If that's 60?
Well, that's a great question. I was online today and I saw in the Metro West Daily News an article that Natick town meeting just voted for 180,000 square foot brand new middle school, 110 million. And the article, which I scanned very quickly, felt like deja vu. It was a 1965 middle school that was a little tired, and the renovating costs were high, and the community decided that pumping that money into the existing building, they would be better served with something new. But I assure you, that number could vary with an uptick of the economy or different region of the state. But MSBA, to their credit, has a lot of great data available to be able to track what that looks like. But this engineering firm helped us move this conversation from, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could do this and add this on? Now we can say feet on the ground. This is $60 million. What really are our priorities? And go from there. But this is not a conversation for now. If MSBA invites us in, then that's a conversation.
And how much was this, right?
90.
How big is Bigger or smaller than what you need?
The article I was referencing was bigger. This is much bigger. Like our school is about 120,000 square feet. I think some of the schematics were suggesting maybe somewhere between 25 to 40,000 square feet. So it could be 150,000 square feet with an addition built in. But again, this is not the feasibility study. This is one firm helping us bring some of our taking our concerns and showing how we might be able to address them. Most of this is going to be to accommodate the existing student population, just to provide them with the space that by today's standards, the students deserve to be educated.
What is your existing student number right now?
On October 1, we had an enrollment of 650. I would anticipate that next year's enrollment, we've got about 300 applicants for a freshman class. That'll probably be about 165. I would say our enrollment will probably be a little bit higher. Not much, but a little bit higher. We've had greater retention, so we've had larger class sizes, not class sizes, but graduating classes. We have a senior class of 151 that will graduate in June. I have a junior class of 166. If that 166 becomes 163 by graduation, that has a counterbalancing effect in terms of how many new students we can take in. So thank you. That's the last document, and the spiral bound document is really unpacking the entire $13.4 million budget, which I would gladly answer questions on, but I would not presume have to go any deeper unless I could do it. This provides the same level of detail we've provided you in the past with various cost centers and breakdowns.
What questions do we have?
There are myriad questions, none of which belong to this particular question. We were just referencing the differences with your capital plan, long-range plan, even better. The downside to the NIDIC piece is that the town's on the hook for the majority of the expense, which is a fairly hefty tax bill for many. Not a comment on education, just a simple comment on expense and exposure. So you were smart to, at least in my years, very smart to say, thinking ahead, nothing we're asking about, not part of our, this is not our lexicon for tonight. It's for a discussion much later when we're much more aware as to what we need to get done. This is how we're line item dealing with these issues. So next year we'll do a roof, or next year we'll do this, that, or the other thing. And hopefully the MSBA will champion pony up and say, hey, as a regional school district, we'll contribute more than the smaller percentage that NATIC seem to agree.
Yes, and as I said, our last project, we also replaced the 1960 boiler a couple fiscal years back. The reimbursement rate was about the same, just a little bit higher than 50%. So in my head, when I think $60 million, $30 million, I mean, as I've said to members of the committee, that's a big ticket item. But we've got a lot of other conversations to have. A new roof, a septic system that is functioning into the next couple of decades. You know, we have to take care of that like we would with our own homes. You know, a few things before the hot tub. You know, make sure the roof is okay.
Quickly back to the out-of-district enrollment. Was there something specific that, I know you said it was Pembroke that was the kind of the driving factor. Was there something specific that pushed that?
I think it was in 2015 or 16, we revised our admissions policy that allowed us to take in non-resident students after we accepted all eligible in-district students. We had a small number of Pembroke students in the first year, and then in the second year, I think it just, I think
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think so.
Any other questions for Tom and Tom?
The out of town, do they have to pay themselves?
They do not. As a public school, that's a requirement of the local community. And that tuition amount, the per pupil tuition amount is set by the state. They look at our foundation budget. They figure out in our foundation budget how much money we spend per pupil, and they cap it at 125%. So in real dollars, it's about $17,000 per pupil. And the sending community is responsible for the child's transportation.
So $17,000 for tuition per year per student, and then they figure out how to get buses.
So at the end of the day,
one of the things, just jumping in really quick, one of the things that we will go over with our school, the Abington School Department, when they are here, is out-of-town transportation. And that's what you're talking about, out of the town.
right, so if you're busing students to Norfolk, Aggie, and Walpole, you are responsible in the same way Pembroke or Marshfield or Hull might be responsible for transporting kids to our school. Which, and just like regional transportation, for us regional schools, it's the same, it's a similar political, the non-resident vocational transportation line, it has a wide variance every year in the state budget. The more that line gets funded, the easier it is on communities who send students out of district for vocational education.
Because we receive reimbursement,
That is correct.
but it's not always,
100%.
I don't think it's supposed to be 100% though, right? I think it's supposed to be 75?
The
Is it 75?
statutes- I can't be sure about whether the exact same statute applies, Barbara, but the premise of regional transportation originally was it was going to be fully funded. And then and then it just wasn't. And then recently, I think they actually amended the law to use the phrase "subject to appropriation," which is just a very nice way of saying, we'll see what we can do, we'll do the best we can. So it's gotten better, there's no question about it. So when we talk to our legislative delegation about transportation, I mean, if we're going to get, if children have the right to have a vocational education, it would be great to see the state not putting so much of a burden on local municipalities to transport children to that education they're entitled to. That's what those lines are, as we know, are supposed to do in the budget to help us. A lot.
Other questions? Anyone?
I'm certainly available. Tom's certainly available with any follow-ups. Love to have you come by the school sometime officially as a group, or the restaurant is open Tuesdays through Fridays from 11:15 to 1:15. Come by and eat in our restaurant. I'll give you a tour.
We thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That, and yes, they have to do this in 8 places, every year.
Whitman last night, Abington tonight. It's all good. It's all good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move on to the second part of our meeting schedule, regular business.
I already have a question.
We have our new copies of the budget. We have the new summary of the budget that the town manager has provided to us. Are there questions that anyone has on that? I know Barbara has one, I know.
But I'll wait for somebody else, because
I know
I've
I
already
have
asked a
one as
lot of
well.
questions. I can't find
Does
it.
anyone else have
Oh, there it is.
particular questions right now? Barbara? Is that your app?
I'm just wondering where we're at with the, what we're looking at for the percent increase for healthcare.
Well, we still have 10% budgeted. We are probably looking at a percentage increase in our current programs, and probably something in the 6% range. Still reluctant to lower the percentage because we have seen a migration of people onto our health rolls who are eligible.
I just was curious because they're saying that
Statute who are eligible.
they're planning on 12% with Mayflower.
And I don't know what programs that their employee groups.
Belong to, right.
Within Mayflower, so I don't know what that is.
No, I just was
Yeah.
wondering where.
The updated document is not substantially different. It really just makes accommodations for the fact that the VW group employment agreement has finally concluded, which really was almost done before town meeting. Those FY18 numbers are now in here as well as our managers group. That's really that's something at this point.
So the question that I was going to ask, that I gave you warning that I had a question on it, between the first version of this document that we got and this one, level services expenses change. Very top, total expenses, investment, FY level service, town manager, all of those went up.
Mine's upside down too.
Summary sheet.
Where are you?
Summary sheet.
Summary. Give it a summary.
Right at the top, first 2-3 lines. The first thing I noticed was that
That would be because
our difference between revenues and expenses increased.
It's the one that's upside down.
well, there you go.
It is in fact slightly upside down. We're not a fan of upside down numbers. So.
Makes it a little more interesting.
Can we tell them a little bit better?
My guess was that was contractual related or something to that effect, but I wanted to ask about that to try to. I tried to dig into the lines a little bit, but I didn't have one for tonight. So. No, I just wasn't sure if you knew specifically offhand what just because I wasn't expecting those numbers specifically to go up.
Much more thorough explanation, Mr. Chairman, as to that specific question.
Maybe either a refinement of your question or just more point specific. Rick, it's not customary to see a town manager exceed the departmental request.
Correct.
Well, once again, I think what you have is departmental requests. They don't put in numbers with regard to, they don't with collective bargaining. So that's not something.
They could do, right, sure.
That's, they don't, it's subsequent to that, that's something that's outside of the, the manager's agreement, which again, and the agreement, which again is much more encompassing than that. As well as, that would be the, really what it all comes down to. That's really just to see if anybody's still paying attention.
It's easier when I'm looking at it as a
Yes.
PDF.
But as far as any substance, that is really those issues that really, for all intents and purposes, a couple of years. Considering the modesty of it, you'd have to, one could wonder why it took so long, but that's this really, you don't have time for that. Well, the interest, I would probably suggest.
I just want to know, basically what this is saying is, Abington, the town, all the things put together, they're going to spend 50 million. Yes? Ish.
In that.
Total, yes, correct. 51.
Except for salt, which will be.
Yes. Yes, essentially the rest of the remainder is the same main points remain from the original document. The only thing, obviously, the school budget from the first document, December 15th, was only at 2%. That's obviously substantive. This document has a 3% increase for the school operating costs overall. And obviously what you heard here is substantial. The $435,000 decrease from the net decrease from a 2% adjustment, which was a plug figure during the early part of the budget process, is significant. And that obviously creates a significant swing in the.
Do you know about how much that is?
I'm sorry?
Do you know about how much that is?
Well, again, it's a $435,000 difference from total
Plus-
swing from what we had been projecting. We projected, again, just a 2% plug figure for their budget before they had
2% increase.
And from what they're proposing is a net decrease from that of $435,000. So
Net decrease
from
what we had planned?
Yes.
The two,
From
the,
what- from the
okay.
budget.
So we,
All right.
we projected a 2%
No,
no, I know. I just
There was
wanted to
an
make sure.
actual
Right.
decrease.
So
So the net decrease was more than just
now,
the 2%.
and as I had mentioned tried to pump in and get my 2 cents in during the DPW conversation, our historically underfunded snow removal budget, which I would not anticipate is going to change from being historically underfunded. It might be a good opportunity to use some of those operating dollars that are being freed up to put in the direction next year towards our snow removal budget. That was make a significant dent towards that. Obviously, we've been underfunding it by about $400,000 historically. Making it some dent would be helpful. We're currently about a little over $200,000 in the hole over expenditure toward the current year's budget. So holding, taking the net savings that we're looking at for next year right now from the VOTEC budget and putting aside funds to fund our over expenditure, taking some funding, the rest of that, and maybe looking at increasing our snow budget and kind of split the difference might be helpful. That way we're also hedging some operating dollars towards FY20 too. Might be a wise move towards setting ourselves up for FY20 a little bit too, and budget pressures we may be facing that we haven't seen yet. So it also saves free cash. The last several years, as you know, we've been using our free cash at the end of the year to retire our snow and ice deficit. And it saves free cash for capital plan for, again, as you know, we were talking about perhaps using it as seed money for the 1-year seed money we know we would need if we were looking at funding full-day kindergarten for FY19. So it allows us to, if we decide to do that in a way that still allows us enough free cash to have other options available for FY19 expenses, one-time expenses. So this gives us more flexibility and still gives us a little bit of a hedge towards other operating costs in FY20. Thinking ahead of year a little more responsible way with operating funds that we didn't think we were going to have available. So just some food for thought.
It's also a one-time.
Well, no, it's not with these funds. These are operating dollars that we had planned on, and we're keeping in mind we're still being fairly conservative with new growth, which is a recurring revenue source too. So by taking a recurring budget expense that we had planned on having to have available for recurring operating costs, and using it to retire a snow debt, part of it, if we put into the actual snow budget, we know it's going for good. There attorney.
Right,
In the
that's-
state law.
yeah.
But the part that we would, that again, this is me speculating right now, you know, this literally was within the last week and a half has become a possibility, so we haven't had a thorough conversation even internally about this, so.
Can you explain, so
Sure.
I'm just confused just because I remember the first time we said this $100,000 is gonna stay $100,000 because it's the best plan to do $100,000 for this and we can go to $1 million and it is what
Yeah,
it is, 'cause
sure, but you still have to, but the following fiscal year, you still have to fund the deficit in its entirety.
Yep.
And that puts budget pressure in the subsequent year.
Yeah, but that was my question in the
So-
beginning, so if we've gone over for 5 years, well,
And we'll go over, you know, with the exception of an incredibly bizarre year, we're always going to go over.
Yep.
And historically, the number we go over is approximately $400,000.
yep,
So if we can make a little bit of movement towards that structural deficit, you know, it would be helpful. Doesn't mean, you know, doesn't mean that we have to, but it's helpful, that's all. So it would be a good opportunity to do that with operating dollars that we really did not expect to have. We did not expect to have these operating dollars because, so, again, this is news that literally a week ago, we did not expect to be in.
and why didn't we, where's the money from?
Well, again, from the difference in the assessment of the social protected.
What we were expecting.
We had expected, we had, in our budget modeling, we had anticipated some increase in the social tech school assessment. So we had, you know, just for the purposes, like you would in all your fixed costs, when you start a budget process, you plug some increase. So we had just anticipated plug a 2% increase until such time that we had some further information. So to get this kind of information, you know, that is essentially a net $435,000 reduction over what we had, you know, had modeled as for their budget, you know, in a, you know, what is always a tight budget, you know, for a town like this. That's significant, so.
And did anything happen that was just,
No,
So
just
there were-
enrollment. Just
Yeah, there were
enrollment.
two factors. The Abington enrollment was down, which I think was a little bit expected opening the
Yes.
new school building. But also as they were mentioning, the VOTEX out of districts enrollment was
Tuition.
up, which meant our portion that we're paying just based on our students went down, but everyone's portion went down based on out of district students.
So they
So-
cut us a break with that additional
Yeah.
money that they get from
the
that.
more kids from out of district went in, everybody. got
So
a break.
with that increase in out-of-district tuition,
Which leads me to think too, if we use, and I almost feel foolish talking too much about this at this time, but to the extent that, you know, we use some of the operating dollars to retire a one-time snow debt instead of absorbing it into recurring, other recurring budgets, just say, for instance, a police or fire budget. We don't know what the out-of-district implications are going to be in FY '20 and '21, so.
Correct. And we
I'd
don't know
rather
what
live
we also don't
another
know what
day.
the Abington enrollment will be if it bounces back up,
Exactly.
et cetera.
So I wouldn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves in using the benefits, the fruits of this reduction at the moment, but using some of it to put towards our structural snow deficit might not be a bad idea with this particular opportunity. But like I said, don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Right. Sean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with the ephemeral piece of knowledge, the nugget that Rick is offering, this is irony. I'm going to table my comments because there is much more complexity than simply looking to plug a so-called structural deficit. I don't disagree, 400 grand's 400 grand. Yet I think that there's time at a later meeting when we have more finite numbers
Yes.
to give the town manager an opportunity to say, here's the fiscal policy of the town and what we're going to move forward with and why, I am, at this particular juncture, regardless of the cash and source of funds, vehemently opposed. And I will explain to you all at the later time so we can look at the complexity. It's easy to understand. You got a big nut, you know it's a big nut, let's just budget for it. Let's hear some of the other components of the budget, what the expectation is for free cash budgeted into our number. Right? DUR has a suggested requirement. Where are we at? How are we going to use it? What is the cap? What does stabilization look like? What's the anticipation? Why use reoccurring to hit a one-time? Might make sense, it's great. Or why build in further structural deficits into reoccurring budgets when you don't know what could happen? So the conversation is a little more beyond the scope
And
of
if the
right
town
now.
accountant heard me speaking, she might be hitting me in the back of the head right now too. So.
Well, especially when we know that they've just told us too, through VOTEC, that they are looking at things on the horizon that could increase.
Well, that's why, like I said, using,
cost.
that's why cautiously
Yeah,
using
capital
some of
and-
these recurring,
Yeah.
would make me happy to close some of our structural gap, but that's why it makes, it would concern me for people to think, oh, we have $400 some odd in operating funds we can reappropriate for some other recurring needs. That concerns me to thinking we could take those recurring dollars and spread them around the rest of the budget. I think it's premature to say that opportunity is there, but again, the idea of using it to close, but again, Sean, I know, I think we're all cautious and trying to be cautious in various ways, but
And
for the right reasons.
and if next year it goes up, meaning enrollment from Abington goes up, there is no more. So basically, we only really have this one particular year of information.
Correct.
And we don't really have any other thing other
That
than
is
the previous
correct.
years, which we actually paid more.
Right, the only thing that I think is comforting is that going back for several years, it was made very clear to us, the advocates of this new building facility, that one of the things that is historic knowledge is that when you build and a town community invests in a new facility like this, it does bring students back to the district. That is not something that's unique to this experience. So it seems like that is paying off for Abington now. Again, how long that experience lasts, I'm not sure. There's a book on that. So something to. I don't know if I'm reading your mind, Sean. Is that part of your concern?
Yes.
Fair enough. So, in any event, one other thing I'll add, and I'll get back to you on the question posed to you, get back to you in the committee, Mr. Chairman, is in addition to the making adjustments for the contracts that are settled for these small groups, is the other non-union, there's a few non-union department heads too, that I have also provided for 2% increases for in here, that I have the ability to do, because I'm not going to essentially treat them, not extend the same benefits that everyone else in the organization is getting for these facilities. So there's provisions for that.
I had this question from a couple meetings ago. So if there's a collective bargaining agreement, and if these guys are in the union or whatever the position, is it the person that's sitting here isn't in the union? Are they all in the union? Is everybody in the union?
Not everybody's.
I know that you just sort of mentioned it.
Not
But
everybody.
yeah. But how and why? Because I thought like a union needs to have union representatives all in there, no?
Their, so like their department head is not a part of the same union. They'd be a part of a different union, like, so you'd have like the.
So for example, the police union, the police chief is not a member of the police union. The officers in the department are members of the police union.
Is he not eligible to be in? That's okay. That's what I'm saying. So is it all of is it all of the higher guy, or is it?
We have we have a supervisory management union, and but not all of the department heads are in that group.
Mhm.
There are some managers who are not in any union, they're not represented, so.
Why?
So that group is not, they're not represented. So any individuals that are not represented, their salaries are determined, set by the town manager. So that's why I made provisions for them that are equal to, similar to the provisions that have been made and agreed to by, ratified by the board of selectmen, the collective bargaining agreements this year. So, but there is no department head who's in the same collective bargaining unit as their staff. So,
Other questions?
thank you. If there's any questions that come along, and as I mentioned before the meeting, I passed out a memo to you. It's again not subject to this meeting, but if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any liaison reports? We do have correspondence. The correspondence, I am guessing, is going to look very familiar because it is from the South Shore VOTEC. We have a copy of the handout from tonight mailed to us from the South Shore VOTEC. That is all we have for correspondence. I'll slide that over to Deb. She did not get a copy.
She did get a
Oh,
copy.
they did give you a copy. Okay, excellent. That's all for correspondence minutes. We have meeting minutes from our February 14th meeting. I know I looked them over before the meeting. I don't know if anyone else did. We had sparse attendance, but a quorum at that meeting. Willing to take motions from anyone who is eligible to make motions on this.
Motion to accept the the February 14th, 2018 FinCom meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Without any, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes? Those opposed? Those abstaining? It is as unanimous as it can be. Our next meeting is next Wednesday, which is March 6th? 7th. 7th. I should have known that. Math was never my strong suit. March 7th. And I don't off the top of my head have which departments are coming in, but that will be on the agenda, which I've already written up, so it'll be out soon. Any further discussion for tonight?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Without any, all those in favor of adjourning? All those opposed? So abstaining? We are adjourned.